cover story tonight is about something that happened 31 years ago. So why should we discuss it now? Because China wants to erase all mention of it. The Tiananmen Square massacre is something that China wants the world to forget. Tonight we bring you the story, how China killed any hope of democracy in Beijing, how the ghost of Tiananmen still haunts it, and how it still guides China's hand to unleash horrors on its own people. 4th June 1989. That's when the Chinese military entered Beijing's Tiananmen Square and crushed a pro-democracy movement. These images are chilling. They shook the world and they led to China's isolation. 31 years on, China is at the same crossroads, isolated and cracking down on pro-democracy protesters. 31 years later, China is still a one-party state. It is still deeply authoritarian. It is still stifling dissent and still muzzling the voices of its citizens. The entire world is commemorating this day, the whole world but China. In Hong Kong, the Tiananmen anniversary is being marked by a crackdown. For the first time in all these years, Beijing has cancelled an annual candlelight vigil in Hong Kong. Barricades surround the Victoria Park in Hong Kong, which is the traditional venue of the vigil. This event was the only one of its size on Chinese soil. It was a tradition to keep the memories of those killed alive. It has now been called off. China is citing a ban on large gatherings, and we thought China had conquered the Wuhan virus. Hong Kong is fighting back nonetheless. Similar gatherings are being held across the city, smaller ones. The citizens are paying tributes from wherever they are. They're also fighting back in the Hong Kong legislature. Beijing has managed to get a controversial bill passed here. It is called the National Anthem Bill. This bill criminalizes disrespect of China's national anthem. It makes the singing of the national anthem compulsory in Hong Kong. Pro-democracy lawmakers say this will tighten Beijing's grip on their city and that they will never let that happen. 700 kilometers away from Hong Kong, Taiwan too is fighting back. Tsai Ing-wen, the Taiwanese president, has urged Beijing to acknowledge the Tiananmen crackdown. She says, and I quote, "Around the world, there are 365 days in a year. Yet in China, one of those days is purposely forgotten each year. In Taiwan, there were once days missing from our calendar, but we worked to bring them to light. I hope one day China can say the same." But we all live in hope. Taiwan wants China to confront the legacy of this massacre. It's not happening in a hurry. The world too wants this, though. The United States Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says, and I quote, "For the first time in 30 years, Hong Kong authorities denied permission to hold the Tiananmen vigil. If there is any doubt about Beijing's intent, it is to deny Hong Kongers a voice and a choice, making them the same as mainlanders. So much for two systems." Also backing Hong Kong's independence is the United Kingdom. Prime Minister Boris Johnson. He's given his government's biggest message of intent. He says China must not infringe on the political and civic freedoms in Hong Kong.
I do think that what is happening now is potentially going to be an infringement of the Sino-UK, Sino-British agreement of 1987. It protects political and civic freedoms in Hong Kong. That looks as though it could be very, very badly eroded by what is being proposed. And so what we're saying is that we want to hold out our hand, a hand of friendship and support and loyalty to the people of Hong Kong.
The European Union too has extended support to Hong Kong. The EU says, and I quote, "We trust that the people of Hong Kong and Macau will be free to mark the anniversary appropriately. Freedom is now more important than ever in light of the recent development." And lastly, in Beijing, a number of Tiananmen mothers paid tributes to the victims at the Wanan cemetery. They've also written an open letter addressed to China's leaders. They want the Chinese regime to explain the events that led to the death of their loved ones. They say that for 31 years, the government has stayed silent without demonstrating the slightest trace of remorse. This letter carries 124 signatures. It seeks compensation. It seeks accountability for the losses. 31 years have passed. China continues to crush dissent. Then it was Tiananmen Square in Beijing. Now it is Hong Kong. The script is the same. Massive protests, brutal crackdowns, and fears of another state-sponsored slaughter. The world is watching. Will it do more this time than it did 3 decades ago? That is the question.